You know, every once in a while, a market doesn't just grow, it completely transforms. And for catastrophe bonds, which are these crucial financial tools that help the world insure against its biggest disasters, 2025 was that year. I mean, it wasn't just a good year, it was a record-shattering, history-making year that totally redefined what's possible in this space. So what we're going to do here is unpack a story of just explosive growth and activity that was really unprecedented. And this whole story is told through hard data, compiled by the absolute authority in this space, Artemis.bm. So let's break down exactly how and why 2025 became such a landmark year for managing global risk. All right, so here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll set the scene for this incredible year and introduce you to our source. Then we'll get into the fun stuff, the anatomy of the records themselves. After that, we'll talk about why all this growth really matters in the real world, and then we'll wrap up by taking a look at what the future might hold. So let's just start with the big picture. When we say 2025 rewrote the record books, we are not exaggerating one bit. This was a year that marked a fundamental shift for the entire market. And the thing you've got to understand here is the sheer scale of the change. We're not talking about small, little incremental gains. No. Across a whole bunch of key metrics, the old records weren't just edged out, they were absolutely left in the dust. And that signals a massive acceleration in how these financial tools are being adopted. But before we get to the juicy numbers, it is so important to know where they come from. Look, with any kind of analysis like this, the quality of your data, well, it's everything, right? It's the foundation that the whole story is built on. So it's essential we're clear about the source behind these incredible figures. Every single number we're about to talk about, every record, every chart, it all comes directly from the Artemis.bm deal directory. This isn't just guesswork or estimation. This is a meticulous transaction-by-transaction record of what actually happened. So who exactly is Artemis.bm? Well, for anyone who operates in this world, they are the gold standard, period. With more than 26 years of history, they are the #1 publication on catastrophe bonds and what's called insurance-linked securities, or ILS. Their deal directory is just universally recognized as the most comprehensive data source out there. To put it simply, when Artemis publishes the numbers, the entire industry stops and listens. All right, so we know where the info's from, and we know it's rock solid. Now, let's get to the main event. We're going to dissect the specific records that made 2025 so historic. Let's get into the numbers. Okay, the first and most obvious question is always about the money, right? This is the big one, the total value of new catastrophe bonds that were issued over the course of the year. How much capital actually came pouring in to cover risk? An absolutely incredible $25.6 billion. Now, what that represents is the total amount of risk, we're talking hurricanes, earthquakes, wildfires, that got transferred from insurance companies and even governments to the global capital markets. That's a staggering amount of new firepower dedicated to funding recovery after disasters. And just to give you some context for that number, the previous record, which was set just 1 year earlier in 2024, was $17.7 billion. So 2025 didn't just beat that record, it blew past it by nearly $8 billion. I mean, that's not just growth, that is a massive leap forward. Okay, so with all that new money flooding in, it naturally leads to the next question. You've got new bonds being issued, but you've also got older ones that are maturing and coming off the books. So what was the net effect on the total size of the market at the end of the year? The total value of all active cat bonds at the end of 2025 hit a new all-time high of $61.3 billion. And this is huge. For the very first time ever, the market has crossed that $60 billion mark. That's a major psychological and financial milestone. And you can really see that explosive net growth right here. The market ended 2024 at just under $50 billion. A year later, it had jumped by almost $12 billion. That's a nearly 24% increase in the total size of the market in just 12 months. It just shows this powerful, sustained demand for this capital. But look, these dollar figures are super impressive, but they only tell part of the story. To really get a feel for a market's health and its maturity, you have to look at who is participating. And in 2025, the market welcomed a whole new class of members. 15, that's the number of first-time sponsors. And sponsors are the companies, the insurers, or even public entities that issue the bond to get coverage. 15 of them came to the cat bond market for the very first time in 2025. That shows you the market is broadening its appeal and really becoming a mainstream tool for managing risk. Now, I know this might seem like a small jump, just beating the old record of 14, but it's actually incredibly significant. What it demonstrates is that the path to market is getting easier, it's becoming more accessible, and that a wider variety of organizations are getting confident enough to use cat bonds as a core part of their protection strategy. And it wasn't just new faces. It was the sheer volume of activity. The total number of individual deals that Artemis tracked hit 122 for the year. That shattered the previous record of 95. This points to a market that isn't just bigger, but it's busier, it's more liquid, and it's more dynamic than it has ever been before. But beyond the volume and the value, something really interesting was happening under the hood, in the very architecture of these deals. See, when a sponsor creates a cat bond, they have to decide what triggers the payout. And in 2025, there was a clear winner. A record-breaking 76% of all new issuance use what's called an indemnity trigger. Now, what on earth does that mean? Well, simply put, it means the bond pays out based on the sponsor's actual financial losses, just like a traditional reinsurance policy would. It's the cleanest, most direct form of coverage you can get, and the fact that it hit a record high shows that the market has a really strong preference for straightforward, effective protection. So we've seen the numbers: record issuance, record market size, record participation. But let's just take a step back for a second. What does all of this actually mean? Why does any of this matter? Beyond the world of finance. This quote from the Artemis analysis just nails it. The cat bond market is cementing an ever more important position in the global risk transfer and reinsurance tower. In other words, this is no longer some niche alternative. It's becoming a core pillar of how the entire world manages and pays for its largest risks. So let's really spell that out. This growth means more and more entities are finding better ways to protect themselves. It means the market is grabbing broad investor attention, which is a huge sign of trust and maturity. And most importantly, it's becoming an absolutely vital source of reinsurance capital. And that's the money that helps communities and economies rebuild after disaster strikes. And just as the source material points out, this is really a testament to the incredible hard work of the entire industry that made this record year happen. After a year as totally transformative as 2025, you can't help but look ahead, right? Where does this market even go from here? Has it peaked, or is this really just the beginning of a powerful new chapter? And that really leaves us with a final, thought-provoking question. This market is not on the fringes anymore. It's a critical piece of global financial resilience in what is an increasingly volatile world. So the question isn't just if it will break more records, but which ones does it need to break next to meet the challenges that are coming our way? As risks from climate change and other perils keep growing, just how much bigger does this market need to be to help society cope? 2025 set an entirely new standard, and you can be sure the world will be watching to see what happens next.